Hi and welcome to DeepDive's YouTube channel. We're happy you joined us again, and this is I Think I Love My Job. If you are new and you don't know me, I am Kalifa Oliver, the resident expert here at DeepDive on all things employee experience. What are we going to talk about today? All things continuous listening. But I want to tell you, this is going to be a two-part session. So get ready for part one. Let's go. So in previous sessions, I've mentioned continuous listening as a major part of monitoring and being able to act on the employee experience. So what is it anyway? Continuous listening is where an organization gathers feedback more broadly across the organization in a more frequent and systemic way, and it's aimed at leadership decisions and it is aimed to support business decisions. The overall aim of a continuous listening program is to really improve the overall employee experience. The implicit assumption of any continuous listening program is that the employee experience is temporal and continuous and is a critical part of the organizational culture. And that basically means that we understand that there are major time points that impact somebody's experience within an organization, but at the same time, there are underlying things that are continuously happening that will also impact. So let me give an example of that. You know, when somebody walks into an organization, their onboarding and orientation is really critical. You want to measure them. Just like their exit, you also want to measure them. But then you also have to understand that they're continuously facing things like technology and satisfaction and stress, compensation, benefits. So you understand that these things are continuous across the organization. The other key thing is just knowing that it is critical to the organizational culture. Any company that really invests in a continuous listening program is saying that they understand their role in the employee experience and they would like to make sure there are tangible measures so that they can take on actions. As implied by the title, continuous listening goes beyond an annual survey, which is typically what you'd find in organizations. It acknowledges the employee life cycle from the time they're recruited to the time they exit the organization. And it seeks to understand the unique and diverse experiences of employees across demographics and life stages within an organization. Let's think about some of the things that you would want to measure in a continuous listening program. You want to look at onboarding. So there's onboarding surveys, orientation surveys. So the difference there might be for orientation, the classes they took, the training they take, how is that experience and was it helpful? Onboarding maybe their technology, did they get their computer, did they get the resources they need, more physical type resources provided by the organization. You might have a monthly pulse survey where you're just asking about sentiment. You might decide to have an annual survey, which is typical in what you find in organizations. There's exit surveys that you want to know before somebody leaves the organization. A key with exit surveys is that you have to be really careful about who you're asking because there's very touchy and ethical things you also have to think about in an exit survey. For example, asking somebody who's left involuntarily versus somebody who's left voluntarily versus somebody who's left due to retirement are very different and can't be all lumped together. And we'll talk more about the ethics of surveys in another session. You also have things like leave surveys. So somebody comes back from leave, right? They're more than likely at a different life stage. What was that experience like? Applying for leave, coming back from leave. Candidate experience, diversity and inclusion. turnover intentions, whether or not they've been thinking about leaving. You want to have retention or stay surveys, asking people why they're staying at the organization. Why somebody stays may be a very different reason for why somebody has left the organization. There are other things, of course, like engagement surveys. So there's so many different things that you can ask continuously. Sometimes it's a one-item survey, sometimes it's a check-in survey, sometimes it's a longer survey. But you get all these things together and you can create a really strong listening program. In addition to what you will ask, which will be where you create data, there may be already existing data that you want to look at. So you may have an intranet where people can leave comments or have discussions. You can assess that data and see if there's any pattern or trend that you might have been missing. You may be able to look at things like Glassdoor, where you can understand how people are feeling outside the organization and what things are coming up related to your organization. So when you put all these things together, you have this wealth of information that is a continuous stream of good data that you can have good analysts clean and structure and really create a good picture of what your organization is, if you will, and really know whether you need to fix things, whether you're doing a good job, if you need to pivot. But the key is just continuously listening to what's happening. Something I want to make really clear at this point is that continuous listening programs are not catch-all for all surveys, right? If you want to know about coffee and have a poll, that's not continuous listening. Continuous listening really needs to be strategic. It needs to capture things that are related to critical business outcomes. It needs to be something that really speaks to the experience of your employees and speaks to what your leadership is willing to do about it. It should be a strategic program aimed at measuring and monitoring key drivers of the employee experience, which are typically things like career development, commitment, satisfaction, compensation and benefits, leadership, and organizational reputation. Those are generally the categories those things fall into, and they really need to be tied to action once that data is collected. For any continuous listening program to be successful, it requires three things. It requires openness, it requires commitment, and it requires action. Openness means your organization is truly ready to listen to what they hear. Data collected in a continuous listening program tends to be both intuitive and counterintuitive. Continuous listening programs can often hold a mirror up to your leaders and your executives and your organizational reputation. And oftentimes it has information and the data that shows up is not what is expected, but you have to be open to it. That leads to commitment. You really have to commit the resources, including the time, the technology, and the talent to work this program correctly, create the right tools, make sure the analysis is good, make sure the reporting is good, make sure that you are truly ready to throw action behind what you find in the organization. If you're not ready to commit to it, then it's not going to be a successful program. And finally, which is related to the other two, you have to be willing to act. It doesn't matter how much you say you've committed or you say you're open to finding things out. If you decide that you don't care what you get, it just becomes an exercise in collecting surveys, and it's frustrating to those who take it. Something I always say is that we talk a lot about survey fatigue. And while that is a real thing, most people really are tired of inaction. People will take 100 surveys if you send it to them if they knew some action is going to come. But if you have a program and you're collecting all this data and you have all this wonderful, robust information that can help you make decisions, and you choose to ignore it for whatever reason, and in many cases that reason is you just don't want to hear it, then your employees are not fools. They'll have a negative feeling towards your programs and to you, and your continuous listening program is going to be unsuccessful no matter how much time, money, and resources you throw behind it. Until your leadership is willing to commit to all three things, openness, commitment, and action, you are not ready as an organization to implement a continuous listening program. You don't want to invest, you don't want to start, you just need to wait until all three things are present. Here are the 4 key components to building a continuous listening program at your organization. 1, a strong technology investment. I can't say this enough. Your technology has to work. In order for people to take these tools, in order for people to give you information, you need to make it accessible to them. You need to make it convenient for them. You cannot have them begging to give you information and frustrating them in the process. You need to make sure that it is fast, it is quick, it is accessible so that people want to give you the program. The worst thing you can do is set up a program and your survey is failing, your technology doesn't work, it's freezing, it won't work. You have to really think about the survey platform you're going to use, whether or not you're going to use a survey vendor, what type of technology you have. Do you have an intranet for people to sign in to take these tools? So you really need to invest in your technology. That is often a part that is seen as secondary and overlooked, and it causes a lot of failure of continuous listening program. 2, strong and strategic data analytic talent. You need to have data scientists and analysts who know how to analyze data and they are comfortable with it. You also want people who are familiar with building data, tools and reporting, such as in tools like Tableau. You want to make sure the reporting is dynamic. You want to make sure that those kind of skill sets are there. You also want to make sure that you have experts and subject matter experts who really understand HR data. While you can understand data and you can build data sets and you can be a data engineer and a data scientist, it is really crucial that any sort of continuous listening program within an organization that they're very familiar with people data and HR data, because HR data and people data needs to be contextualized. So I strongly recommend people with backgrounds like IO psychology, I'm not biased, I promise, organizational behavior, HR management. You really want people who have not just familiarity with data, but they really understand the theory and the background with data patterns and trends related to employees. You also want to think about people with business intelligence backgrounds so that they could pull data and they could build structures and systems. You really want to make sure you have somebody on the team or some people on the team who can really clean and streamline in the way that it needs to be streamlined, so that when it has to be analyzed and modeled, it is easier to do so. And then finally, you don't think about this a lot, but you really want someone or some people who have a background in communications. You want to make sure that when you write your reports, you're not writing reports that are so highly technical that it can get lost what you're trying to say. You really want to make sure that the data is easy for leaders to make those decisions, and that the information that you're giving them is palatable and easy to understand and helps them very quickly and efficiently. 3, I've said this before and I'll say it again. You really need sponsorship and advocacy from executive leaders. You need executive leaders within the HR business, and you definitely need executive sponsorship from an organizational leader as well. If you don't have these things, you can't get the technology you need. You don't have access to the budgets you need. You may not be able to hire the talent you need. You need them to advocate. You also need them to model the behavior of leaders and managers below them, because if they can see the benefit of it when that data comes back, not only can they advocate listening, they can advocate action. And fourth and finally, you also need organizational readiness. Your organization needs to be at a place where they are ready and open and willing to discuss these results, to be transparent about those results, to discuss what it would take to make the changes, and to really use this tool and this program as a springboard for overall employee experience improvement and stability. So here are some key takeaways about continuous listening programs. Continuous listening has to be a crucial part of any HR or people analytics division. Successful continuous listening must be paired with concrete action and transparency if you are truly trying to make a change. Now, you can avoid listening to your employees if you want, but I can promise you that it is going to come up, and generally when it does come up, it's not in ways you like, and it's usually very painful, very public, and often extremely expensive to fix. And finally, when you set up a continuous listening program, the truth is you may not always like what you hear, but I'm here to tell you, let the data be your friend. So that's it for part 1 of our discussion on continuous listening programs. So I look forward to talking to you some more about developing and designing a continuous listening program. I hope this has been really helpful. I hope you enjoyed what you heard here today, and if you have anything you'd like to share, or any ideas or any feedback, please leave it in the comments. If you like what you've seen or heard, don't forget to subscribe, and remember, there is always room to have a brilliant experience. See you next time.